Hi, my name is Amira Shawi Badawi, and I am a professional certified coach from the International Coaching Federation. Today marks the beginning of International Coaching Week. It is a week-long celebration of coaching. As coaches, we aim to spread awareness about what is coaching and how coaching can help. يعني الحمد لله since 2017 I've held multiple events during International Coaching Week. However, this year I wanted to do something different. I wanted to share my story, how I became a coach and how I chose to specialize in occupational burnout. I became a coach in late 2016. Before that, I had 18 odd years experience in the corporate world, meaning I had a 9 to 5 job. I was a full-time employee, and it became a big part of my identity of who I was. And I was familiar with the term burnout very early on in my career. Maybe since the beginning. At the time, I was working as a software developer, and I just assumed that occupational burnout is, it's part of the industry. It's one of the prices that I had to pay to work in this industry, whether it's software, computers, or things like that, technology. I was surprised when my colleagues didn't know what burnout was. But anyway, I just thought at the time, burnout is going to happen. It's part of my job. And all I have to do is to resharpen my saw. But at the time, I took that to mean that I'd work on my knowledge and skills and competency as a software developer. But then when I turned 30, I had moved from software development into managing information systems, and then later I was working in managing business processes and process improvement. I wasn't really working in technology predominantly anymore. And this was a job that I almost designed for myself. So it was a job that I liked. I had the title of manager. It was a multinational organization. I was working in the Egyptian subsidiary. But it was a job that I liked. I designed for myself. I liked the company a lot. I liked the management style, whether it was, the local one, the regional one, or the global one. And I liked the people with whom I was working, the team. And I also had a very supportive manager, a manager that I enjoyed working with, somebody I worked with twice after that, and he's my current manager as well. However, when I started to really get burnt out, it started very subtly. In the beginning, it was like I would wake up in the morning and I didn't want to go to work. It kind of reminded me of school. When I'd wake up like, I don't want to go to school. It was the same thing. I just didn't want to go to work. This was 15 years ago, so my alarm clock would go off. Didn't have a smartphone at the time, so I was using just a very traditional alarm clock. So my alarm clock would go off. I'd get up and go, God, I don't feel like going to work today. I just want to sleep for just 15 more minutes. And I'd had to manually set the clock to an additional 15 more minutes. And then I'd go back to sleep. The alarm would go off. I'd wake up. I'm like, I don't feel like going. There's 15 more minutes, 15 more minutes. And I'd continue to do that until there were no more 15 more minutes left for me. So at that point, I just very quickly get up, get ready, and go to the office. When I'd get to work, I'd just stare at my screen. My job at the time consisted of a lot of documentation. It was done in English. We had templates, so it was a fairly simple thing to do. Yet I struggled to do it. Like, I couldn't find the words. And for other tasks, again, I knew what needed to be done and I knew how to do it, but somehow I couldn't access the part of me that could do it. I tried, and it was very difficult to access that part of me that could do these tasks. And I started to procrastinate. And I would busy myself with, dummy work like binding manuals or laminating documents, work that junior staff could actually do. But I didn't miss deadlines, because right before the deadline, the day before, something like that, I would very quickly get up and do the job. And I was so good at my work that, there was no decline in performance. On the contrary, the feedback I was getting was, we're happy with your work. And I was progressing at my job. But I knew that, no, I wasn't doing the best that I could do. I knew that I could do better. And then my internal voice, my negative internal voice, and I like to call her the bitch within, she started to get very, very loud. And there was two narratives going on in my head at that time. The first narrative was doubting my work. Is there any value in what I'm doing? And I used to ask myself, like, I've been working for 8 years, almost constantly, no breaks whatsoever. And during that time, I got my master's degree, my MBA. But have I really acquired any marketable skills or skills that, people would want to pay for? The answer was no. I always told myself, no, what am I doing? I don't do anything. I used to tell myself that a trained monkey could do my job. That's the kind of narrative that was going on in my head. And also I kept telling myself, am I really benefiting the company? Am I just getting paid, but am I giving back something that's worth this payment? I didn't believe so. So this was the first narrative that was going on, my negative internal voice. The second one was, I was 30 at the time. I was single. I'm still single, but I was single at the time as well. And never been engaged, never had a boyfriend, never been in a relationship. So the little bitch within started saying, face the facts. You're not getting married. You're going to be single forever. So the truth is, you're going to have to work until the day you die to support yourself, because it's just you. There's nobody else. And you're going to have all this, pursuing my passion and working on passion projects. And I want to work with good people. The money doesn't matter. All of this is just bullshit. You have to make a lot of money because you have to buy a house, you have to buy a car, you have to save a ton of money to pay for all the medical care and all the operations that you're going to have when you're older. So, so you better shape up. So those were the two narratives that were going on in my head at the time. One was I wasn't worthy of love, and the other one was I wasn't worthy of employment. But I needed to make more money because I'm going to be single forever. And because I didn't believe that I was really giving value to the organization, I didn't think that I had the right to go to my manager and ask for a raise or salary increase. Instead, I decided to leave a job that I like, leave a company that I enjoyed working with, and a manager that was very supportive, and seek employment elsewhere. And I was successful to find a job relatively quickly, and the job paid me almost 1.5 of what I was making before. But again, I was still doubtful, and the doubt came from, was I worthy of this new job? And I contacted my technical manager from my first job because he had worked with that new company, and I wanted to get his advice. Should I go? And he came back and he said, look, it's a really good company. The people there are really great. They have a lot of integrity. However, I don't think you'll be a good cultural fit there. The way they work is very different from the way that you work. I don't think you're going to fit in there. You're not going to be happy there. My advice to you is not to go. But I didn't listen to him. Why? Because the bitch within, the internal voice, came back and said, guess what? You don't deserve the offer they gave you. You should be happy that they're willing to pay you this. Just go. Who cares if you're not going to fit in? Just go, do the work, get the money, save up, buy the apartment, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So I didn't listen to his advice. I left my job at the time, and I took this other job. And I was miserable. When I reflect on this now, I believe that the misery I wasn't unhappy from the beginning. It was just kind of bottled up and just, pushed down below the surface. So when I moved to this other job, it just kind of bubbled up and came out. I remember every day on my way back home, I would just sob, sobbing, uncontrollable tears on the way home in the taxi. And even when sometimes I couldn't find a taxi and I had to walk to another location, I would be walking the streets of Cairo after dark, just crying uncontrollably. And I didn't stay in that company. I left even before the probation period was over. And I decided at that time, I'm just going to not work. I'm just going to stay home, and just because I was feeling, I felt lost. I knew something was missing in my life. I just didn't know what it was, and therefore I didn't know what to do to pursue it. I didn't want to seek another job and then just to let them down, because I had already felt guilty about that job that I applied for and I got accepted, and I didn't continue. Um, and I knew that I felt very alone. This was when the suffering started to get very, very intense. And at that time, I reached out to some people in my support network that I thought, I just wanted to kind of word out what I was feeling. And it was like, something's missing. I don't know what it is. I just, need something different, something more. I don't know why. And I reached out to 3 people, and their feedback was really consistent. It was along the same message of, my God, do you know how lucky you are? Do you know how many people would die just for a fraction of the life that you have? Um, you were a manager in a multinational organization. You got paid a lot of money. You're single, so you don't have any financial obligations. So your income basically was, all of it was disposable income. You could do whatever you want to do without, with complete disregard to everybody else, because there was nobody else in the decision. You didn't have to consider a husband or kids or whatever. You could like travel at the drop of a hat and stuff like that. Do you understand how lucky you are? So I was feeling lost and alone. And then I reached out for help, and that was the feedback I got. And this further isolated me with guilt, because I felt like I was ungrateful. I had a really good life, but I was ungrateful for wanting something different, or for not being happy with what I had. Because I do go back and I ask myself, Amira, were you happy or were you unhappy? And I remember in my 20s, I kept telling myself, I'm content. I have a good life. I'm content. But I never said I was happy. And I didn't know what to do. And at the time, I was living with my mother and my brother, and they were working. So in the morning, I had the apartment totally to myself. There's nobody there. So I would just sit on the couch crying, because I did not know what to do. And this is when the pain, it just became very visceral and very, it was hard. And I knew that I needed professional help, because the thoughts just kept getting darker and darker and darker, and I did not know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of this funk that I was in. But at the time, I had no idea that there was something called coaching. This was 15 years ago, and I didn't really know the difference between a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist. And I don't even know if there were therapists available in Egypt at the time, 15 years ago. And I didn't have the courage to go to a psychiatrist, because I had to ask somebody to refer a doctor to me. So I'd have to talk about these things, and there was a lot of stigma associated with mental illness at the time. There still is stigma, but it was multiplied. It was much worse then, because I felt, because I reached out to people I felt safe with, and their response was, you're an ungrateful bitch. So I felt if I would reach out to other people, say, do you know a psychiatrist, because I don't feel well, I felt like it would be like, what do you have to complain about, you privileged ungrateful bitch. So yeah, that was a time there was a lot of shame and there was a lot of guilt. And again, it just started to escalate, and my mind would go to very dark places and very dark thoughts, and it was very painful. So in order to kind of run away from the pain, I started to busy myself with just activities, things. The first thing I did was I purged my closet, got rid of anything I didn't wear in the last 2 years, got rid of it. I went back to reading. I really enjoyed reading, but I stopped reading after I graduated college and started working, and then I started my master's degree, so any available time I had was dedicated to studying, and after that it was like reading business-related books. So I went back, I started reading literature, fiction. I babysat my nephew, he was like, I think he was like 7 or 8 months old, and that was awesome. Like 3 days, just me and him, there's nobody else, and we'd play together, and I'd put him down for a nap, and I taught him how to eat with a spoon. Those 3 days were just amazing. And then I decided I want to take care of myself, my body. And I started to exercise. I wanted to eat better. So I started to cook. And then I discovered that I really enjoy cooking, really enjoy it a lot, cooking and baking. And a few months after that, I started to feel better. I wouldn't go as far as saying that I was happy, but I felt lighter. And I told myself, I want to work. I like working. I don't want to have this existence where I don't work. I want to work, but I didn't feel confident enough to go back to a full-time job. So I thought, well, let me find a job as a consultant, a part-time consultant. And I was able, alhamdulillah, to find a job as a freelance consultant through my manager. And that at that point, I was really happy. I was really happy because, again, I was a freelance, so I had full autonomy. I was in control of my time. If there's a project I didn't like, I just didn't take it. And I don't want to do this. So I was really, really happy. But my income was kind of sporadic. There could be months where I had no income at all. Other months, I remember there was one particular month where I made 3 times the amount that I was making before my full-time job. And I was really, really, really happy. But before the end of the year, the bitch within, she got up, she woke up, and she was like, her voice started to get louder, and she was saying, okay, had your fun, you've relaxed, you're taking your sabbatical, that's what I called it, taking your sabbatical. Okay, so now it's time to go back to the real world and get a real job, a full-time job, because guess what? You're still single, you're still going to be single forever, you still have to do all these things that you have to do, and it's going to be you and only you forever. So I went back to a full-time job, and for the next 9 years, I kind of ping-ponged between a good place and a bad place, between feeling very depressed and then just kind of climbing a little bit out of that, and then going back to the depression and coming back out of it. And I moved from job to job, but also during those 9 years, I moved to the US and I lived in New York for 2.5 glorious years. And this was a huge tipping point for me because for the first time, I was really, really happy. I was really, 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 really happy, all the time happy. And I started to realize that work isn't my identity. I don't derive my happiness from work. On the contrary, work is just a means to an end. It's not my end by all means. Or my work at that time was not my end, and I derived satisfaction and the feeling of achievement from other things. And I started to give priority to those other things. However, I had to return. Or I chose to return to Egypt, and it just seemed because I was returning back to my to where I used to live, that I had to return back to my old way of living, and I struggled to do that. I just couldn't go back to the old way of living before New York, and I struggled for 2 years after I returned to Egypt until I kind of stumbled upon coaching. That was the end of 2016, and I took my first coaching course with Intellect Coaching School. Ahmed Ibieri was he was our instructor and a mentor coach. And the thing is, we were learning what is coaching, what are the competencies and skills, and what are the tools. But also during the class, Ibieri would ask these questions, and I would go home every evening and I would just start thinking and reflecting on those questions. Because as coaches, we learn the craft of coaching, but we also work on ourselves. We have to work on our own self-awareness and our own self-development. So this started a journey of self-awareness that was it was painful, but it was also awesome and great. And I started to get to know who I am. I kind of reintroduce myself to me, so to speak. And then in early 2017, I decided to become a full-time coach. I came to the realization that full-time corporate life, it's not for me. I was struggling not because of the companies that I worked with or the people or the job or the industry. It's just because of the nature of the 9 to 5, the very regimented day, not owning my time. It conflicts with who I am as an individual and as a person and how I create. And I started to integrate self-care into my priorities. My well-being became one of my priorities, not just professional excellence and professional achievement, but I started to consider my well-being as part of my achievement. And early on, Ibieri, my mentor coach, would always say, guys, you need to select a niche or a speciality as a coach. You cannot be everything for everybody. Having a speciality will give you an edge. And early on, I knew beyond doubt that I wanted to specialize in occupational burnout because it started 15 years ago. And I still remember how painful and how isolating the feeling was, the experience was. And it brought out a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And so that's why I decided to become a coach. And that's why I decided to specialize in occupational burnout. Because if anybody's suffering out there, I want them to know that you can reach out to a coach, you can reach out to a therapist, and they will help you. You are not alone in this struggle. Occupational burnout, although it is classified in the ICD, the World Health Organization International Classification of Diseases, it is not a psychological disease. It is a psychological or a disorder. It's not a disease, not a disorder. It is a condition. Therefore, coaches can help. But if you're not sure if you need a coach or a therapist, go to a coach. A coach can help you identify if you need further help, if you need therapy, and they can refer you to a therapist. So that's my story. For those of you who decided to continue until the end of the video, thank you so much for allowing me to share my story, and happy International Coaching Week.